many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
I'm not quite sure if we're connected. I might have to try to reconnect here. I'm having some issues with Skype on at least my end. I'm not getting the proper internet connection. Okay, we should be live now. Sorry about that. Skype on my end was not wanting to. So now we are connected. Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. I'm going to go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. I don't know if you were able to hear me because, again, Skype was acting very weird. But this kind of goes into the abuses of FISA and really the whole corrupt nature and the founding of this idea of the FISA court and using it in a corrupt way. It was, in a way, founded on that type of principle. But Ron Paul here, he has Jim Bovard on here, and they go into really the problem's not just the people. It really comes down to the problem is how the system is corrupt in itself. And they really kind of get into depth in a short period. I like what they bring up in this. So let's go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report, and we'll cover it in detail after.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Dr. Paul is traveling for a few days this week, so we'll be doing a couple solo shows, but it's an opportunity for me to get some of the people that I really admire to join me and to bring you some good perspectives, some new perspectives on things that are in the news. And today I'm so thrilled to have an old friend, someone whose work I admire so much, and I read him religiously, and that's Jim Bovard. Jim, are you there with us?
Yeah, Daniel, thanks for having me on. I have to say I'm somewhat disappointed that you're not wearing a white shirt today, a white shirt and tie, but that's okay. I'm not going to hold it against you.
Well, the boss is away, so the mice will play.
Hey, same here.
So, Jim, you've written a couple of great pieces on the whole Nunes memo, the House Intel Committee memo, the whole FISA thing. What I loved about what you did is that you took a whole different turn, because everyone, the partisan bickering was, oh my gosh, you Republicans are releasing classified info. The Republicans are, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, FISA's being abused. You're trying to bring down the president. You bring a whole different perspective into it. And so I thought, it would be great to talk about that today. But I think I'd like to start with a quote that I think probably captures the root of the problem rather than how it's framed in the media. And this is by someone who I think we both have a certain amount of respect for. I think he's a decent guy. He's probably one of the best guys in the media, and I think he gets it in a lot of ways, and his takedown of Max Boot was absolutely one for the ages. And I'm talking about Tucker Carlson, as I say, a guy who, for the most part we admire. But here's a quote that he had that was tweeted from his show yesterday that kind of, I think, encapsulates the problem. He said, quote, "For the first time in generations, Americans have reason to believe that our intelligence and law enforcement agencies gravely misuse the powers we have given them." First time in generations. Jim, something tells me that you got a problem with that quote.
Well, it certainly made me smile. I mean, it's interesting. Tucker Carlson has done a lot of excellent work. He has some very good riffs on the FBI late last year when some of the scandal stuff was coming to the fore. But as far as the first time in generations, I guess if you don't count the Iraq War, the 2003 Iraq War that the intel agencies helped lie us into, they were very servile to Vice President Dick Cheney. My impression was that Cheney told them what they were going to find, and then they said, "Yes, sir." And there's a lot of other scandals going back decades on this. It's fascinating to see how a lot of people have been indignant at any criticism of the FBI or the CIA or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, because all three of these have a profoundly tainted record.
They do indeed. And, I think maybe we'll throw out another quote because I think it captures what you just said. The left's reaction, unfortunately, I don't want to lump everyone into it. When I say the left, I just mean in general. But Rob Reiner, the great intellectual filmmaker on the left, he said, when you libel James Clapper and John Brennan, you libel America. It's sort of a weird, perverse John Wayne, I think someone said.
Yes, there was. I've seen some very good quips on that, but the basic question I have is, how is it possible to libel Clapper and Brennan with the number of lies that they told? I mean, if you go back 4 or 5 years, you got Brennan, who was head of CIA, authorizing the CIA to spy on the U.S. Senate when the U.S. Senate was getting ready to blow the whistle on CIA torture. You have Clapper out there telling so many lies. I mean, he's someone who lied about the surveillance that FISA court approved, which I think the statute of limitation for that perjury charge is getting ready to expire next month, which he'll probably have a celebration maybe. Maybe, it might be he gets invited on MSNBC to celebrate with Rachel Maddow. I don't know. But a part of what fascinates me is looking at the history of this FISA court is they have approved so much illegal surveillance. And the whole idea that you have a secret court which secretly authorizes the wiretapping of a presidential campaign, this is something which should have been such an outrage, but instead people are quibbling, well, what did the FBI say in the memo? Did it have this, or was that in the footnote, or was it, was it clear? I would be interested to see the transcript of the FISA court hearing that authorized wiretapping a presidential campaign, because these FISA judges have tended to be as servile as a day is long. It's a secret court, so they think that their kowtowing is not going to be exposed, but it should be. I mean, Americans deserve to know what the FBI told them, and even more importantly, we know Americans deserve to know what the FISA judges themselves said before they signed off on this surveillance warrant, which might have been what those two FBI agents who were having the affair, what they talked about having an insurance policy. Maybe this was it.
So we really just saw the tip of the iceberg. But you've written in these pieces, and you've written before about the creation of the FISA court system. The history of it. Unfortunately, we have a tendency of believing that we wake up to, a new world every day, and that's not necessarily the case. Can you take us back to when FISA was created? What was the purpose of it? What was it trying to address? What was happening in our country at the time that made them say, we need a new system? Was it to reform? Take us back to FISA's creation, if you can, Jim.
Yeah, FISA was created in 1978. It was in response to the illegal wiretapping done by Nixon. The Supreme Court ruled in 1972 that the president did not have authority on his own to order wiretaps. This was one of those Supreme Court decisions that vanished after George W. Bush became president, and Bush did that on his own authority. But there were the investigations by the Church Committee, which showed that the FBI and CIA had done a vast amount of illegal surveillance of the American people. And so this FISA court was created as a way to avoid letting presidents and intelligence agencies choose who they're going to wiretap. There was a different standard set for this court to authorize a wiretap because it was targeted to foreign agents. So as I understand it, the court would have to find probable cause that someone is a foreign agent. And the reason that's a different standard is because the Fourth Amendment of the Bill of Rights prohibits warrantless, unreasonable searches of Americans. And that was what had been happening before the FISA court, and Congress and President Carter sought to prevent that from occurring again.
So really it was an attempt at reform of a system gone haywire that created the opportunity for the system to go even more haywire, it sounds like. It almost reminds me of the War Powers Resolution that was designed to prevent presidents from taking us into war on their own. and it turns around and it actually authorizes presidents to take us into war on their own without a congressional declaration. But all this aside, its strange birth aside, the typical Washington thing aside, how well did it work? Did it work well in the beginning, or will we see abuses from the very beginning of the FISA?
There were probably a fair number of abuses early on. We don't really know that much. I mean, it's a secret court, which with secret hearings, and we almost never see the transcripts of those cases. Things got a whole lot worse after 9/11 because George W. Bush, there was a quote that Jack Goldsmith, who was one of the top people in the Justice Department, Goldsmith said that David Addington, who was the top aide to Dick Cheney, David Addington said that the U.S. is only one bomb away from getting rid of that obnoxious court, the FISA court, because they wanted to reestablish that the president on his own authority had the right to order wiretaps of Americans. And that was not the law of the land. George W. did it anyhow after 9/11. The changes in the Patriot Act, which Ron Paul was one of only 3 Republicans to oppose, the changes in the Patriot Act made it much easier to do surveillance that wasn't really authorized under FISA. But what was much worse was the FISA judges rolled over for some of the Bush administration interpretations of the law and the Fourth Amendment that turned the federal surveillance into a dragnet against Americans. And then 4 years later, you got the New York Times blowing the whistle on how the NSA was wiretapping up to 500 people here in the U.S. without a warrant at a time and surveilling millions of Americans' emails. And then people were saying, well, where's the FISA court? There was, at that point, it should have been obvious the FISA court was utterly unreliable as far as safeguarding Americans' rights and liberties.
And don't they have a pretty good record of approving the requests for...
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's, what happened, I mentioned the New York Times thing. A few months later, the USA Today exposed that the NSA was, sweeping up millions of Americans' phone records, calling records each day. And there was a big backlash after that USA Today piece. So what the Bush people did, the Bush Justice Department, those folks went to the FISA court and said, hey, we have a new interpretation of the Patriot Act. There's a clause in the Patriot Act which authorizes the FBI to ask for any records that are tied to a terrorism investigation. So the wizards in the Bush Justice Department decided that the telephone records of all Americans were tied to a terrorism investigation, basically treating all Americans like terror suspects. What did the FISA court say? Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And it's like, for the love of goodness, if you can't stand up and say no there, then it's not really a court. It's just, I had a piece in the Hill yesterday where I said that the FISA court has a long record of heaving buckets of judicial hogwash to cover up the ravaging of Americans' privacy. And that's what they did in that decision with the roundup under the Patriot Act of all of our phone records. They have done that in other decisions. And it's interesting. This is a secret court. There have been a lot of Supreme Court decisions that define the Fourth Amendment. And some of them are bad. Some of them are pretty good. But what the FISA court did was act as if the Fourth Amendment didn't really exist, and it also chose to ignore a lot of the Supreme Court decisions, which would have strictly limited the things FISA court approved.
And this culminated, then you talk about, the Bush people went back to FISA to make legal the illegal things they've been doing. Is this where we got the so-called Protect America Act, which we also refer to as the FISA amendments? Is that this codified that into law? I mean, isn't that a great title, Jim? The Protect America. Can you imagine being a member of Congress and voting on a bill, Protect America Act, and vote no? It's something out of the Soviets, I think. But anyway, is this what happened? Is this how it was codified?
Yeah, that was part of it. But keep in mind, the Protect America Act, a wonderful wrinkle on that almost nobody recalls, is that the Bush administration set out a rumor that there might be a terrorist attack on Capitol Hill shortly before Congress voted for that. That was something that Jane Harman actually actually blew the whistle on and said that the Bush administration had issued that warning, knowing it was full of crap. But that was part of how they stampeded that thing. And the details of that Protect America Act, it basically allowed the government to surveil any American who exchanged phone calls or emails with anybody abroad. So it just, it did not even make a pretense of targeting terrorist suspects. Instead, it's like, okay, somebody was talking to Germany, so boom, let's take their calls. This is something that's it was an embarrassment that Congress passed it. It's the kindest word I could say. I mean, there was someone had a great line many years ago that if the Fourth Amendment was if somebody proposed that in a bill to Congress, they'd probably not even get out of the House committees. There's so much contempt. I mean, and this, I'm sure Ron Paul spoke against this, but he didn't have much support on his side of the aisle or on the other side of the aisle. Well, Congress has done a horrible job on privacy.
Yeah, well, he doesn't want to protect America. Actually, Dr. Paul wrote about it in his column this week, and I'm sure you've thought about this whole idea too. One of the things that really irked him and irked me, and I'm sure it irked you, is that, Devin Nunes for the Republicans, even President Trump is calling him a hero and a great hero for releasing this. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but the fact of the matter is he was the number one person pushing the extension of the FISA amendments, preventing it from sunsetting, keeping it intact, even as he was sitting on this information of how it was being abused, not only for us lowly citizens, but even for a presidential candidate was falling into the dragnet and being abused. So, that seems pretty dastardly, doesn't it, Jim?
Well, it's a paradox. No, it's shady. It's shady. And it's appalling that sequence would have happened. Justin A. Nash and others were out there. Ron Wyden, people like that were raising hell. But Congress got rolled as usual. Yeah. But no, I mean, it's just folks should be skeptical of almost all the players on Capitol Hill in this current controversy. There are a handful who are pushing for almost a full disclosure of everything in this case, and those have got good credit. But I want to see the damn transcript of that FISA court hearing on this search warrant of a presidential campaign.
Yeah, release the transcripts. Forget about the memos.
That's a hell of a lot more important because it goes to the heart of how this court operates. Yeah. And there was a hearing. There was a transcript that got released from them about 15, 16 years ago, which the court was talking about the proposal by the Bush administration to expand surveillance. And there was the Secrecy News got the transcript, analyzed it, and said that it was amazing how servile that the judges sounded, and they were so servile that they even asked Justice Department officials on how they should handle criticism of themselves. And this is a court. This is an independent court. This is a joke.
That's what happens when you have secret courts paid by the state. Yeah. I guess we'll probably need to close this down, Jim, but you have a great quote in your Hill piece that I'm going to throw back at you because I know you'll have a witty quip in response. But here's our great James Comey, the great person that we're told by the Rob Reiners of the world we dare not say anything against. Here's what he had to say about releasing the Nunes memo, which for all its shortcomings, we're happy to see it. He says, quote, "Releasing this memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with the intelligence community, damaged relationship with the FISA court. It's the end of the world." What is your take on Comey's panic attack?
It's always fun to see his piety piffle on Twitter. He's as sanctimonious as the day is long. But something which I want to know is during the time Comey was FBI chief, how many times did FBI agents mislead or lie to the FISA court? Because the FISA court came out with a decision last year, which they had 10 pages, a list of 10 pages of complaints about how the FBI had misused the law or misused the information they FISA authorized them to get. How many falsehoods did FBI agents tell to the FISA court when Comey was boss? because this is something that goes to the heart of Comey's credibility and the entire FISA court process.
That's a very good point. Comey, come clean.
Good luck on that one.
Yeah, well, we could probably talk for an hour about this, Jim. You're such a great resource, and I'm glad you're watching it and writing about it. I'm glad they're giving you a platform. I really want to thank you for joining us again on the Liberty Report, and look forward to having you back again soon.
Hey, thanks so much, Daniel. It was lots of fun to take some shots at these things with you.
And I want to thank our viewing audience today for tuning in to the Liberty Report, even with Dr. Paul gone and tolerating me as the lead anchor. I hope if you like the show, you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel and have your friends and your enemies subscribe so you have something to talk about. So thanks again for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and please come back and see us tomorrow.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check him out, subscribe while he's not being, blacklisted or censored quite yet on YouTube. That's why it's really important to also go to RonPaulLibertyReport.com, sign up for the email list. That way, if they do lose their ability to broadcast on YouTube, that you can still get information. Now, I have more about the surveillance, but about what they were talking about. FISA courts have been so secretive to even know how corrupt they are. We don't have the opportunity to see all this information. It's all secret. To really push for transcripts out of the FISA court would be a big accomplishment. And I think it would expose the corruptness of the FISA court. And I have this one article here from Reason.com. Senate memo on surveillance of Carter Page suggests FBI was misled by Steele. Said, did the FBI mislead the federal surveillance court about the credibility of the information it submitted to get authorization to snoop on an aide to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, or did the source of the information mislead the FBI about his own behavior, prompting the FBI to mislead the court accidentally in its warrant applications? Now, from what I've heard, this is not the article, but from what I've heard, the FBI had been looking at Page since 2013. What it says here is essentially the question is this: what did the FBI actually know about the controversial Steele dossier that alleges all sorts of ties between the Trump campaign and the Russian government? And what did it know about former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele when it used his information to get authorization to snoop on former Trump aide Carter Page? This week, the Senate Judiciary Committee released a redacted copy of a January memo by Senator Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham asking the Department of Justice to consider charges against Steele for lying to the FBI. The release of this Senate intelligence memo relates directly to the Nunes memo produced by the staff of House Intelligence Committee Chairman Representative Devin Nunes in January and made public last week. In some ways, the two documents dovetail nicely. Both memos argue that Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was not properly informed that the dossier was put together by Fusion GPS and funded by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign, and both argued that Steele's motivations to keep Trump from getting elected prompted him to leak information inappropriately to the media while he was working with the FBI. But a close look at the Grassley memo shows an important difference from what Nunes has claimed. Nunes' memo argued that the FBI knew that Steele had been leaking to media outlets and concealed this information from the court. After all, the FBI continued using his information after it learned Steele was leaking and cut ties with him, but the Grassley memo suggests that Steele misled the FBI. Simply put, Mr. Steele told the FBI he had not shared the Carter Page dossier information beyond his client and the FBI. The department repeated that claim to the FISA court. Yet, Mr. Steele acknowledged in sworn filings that he did brief Yahoo News and other media organizations about the dossier around the time of the publication of the Yahoo News article that seems to be based on the dossier. These facts appear to directly contradict the FBI's assertions in its initial application for the Page FISA warrant, as well as subsequent renewal applications that the FBI repeatedly presented to the court that Mr. Steele told the FBI he did not have authorized contacts with the press about the dossier prior to October 2016. The FISA application makes these claims specifically in the context of the September 2016 Yahoo News article, but Mr. Steele has admitted publicly before a court of law that he did have such contacts with the press at this time. It says here that this disagreement matters in terms of determining whether the FBI had a good sense of Steele's credibility when using his documents to bolster its wiretapping requests. The Bureau acknowledged to the court that there were some political motivations behind the dossier's creation, but it didn't go into detail. You can read the rest of that article at reason.com. I really think we need to completely get rid of the FISA court. It's too secretive, and it allows for corruption without any checks. There's maybe. Okay. I want to get maybe if I can find it here. Give me a second. Another article on Reason.com had a quote from Senator Rand Paul, who tried to organize a filibuster to stop FISA from being reauthorized without reforms, applauded the memo's releases for similar reasons. While I applaud the release of this memo, I also call for Congress to take immediate action to help prevent such behavior in the future. It is imperative to start by listening to Americans who have expressed outrage over its disregard for the Fourth Amendment and re-examining the powers it reauthorized right before we learned of the memo. Continuing to ignore the Constitution will only guarantee that others fall victim to government abusing its domestic surveillance powers. And really, it's getting sad that really we've come to accept a police state. I'm going to play an interview here from We Are Change with Ron Paul about the deep state. Hopefully it takes off.
Back. Special occasion, and we are joined by Andrew Meyer, the former editor-in-chief of We Are Change, and also the Don't Tase Me guy, bro. And of course, Ron Paul, former presidential candidate and former congressman from Texas. Now, this video was actually supposed to be live, but CNN actually put a fake strike against our channel, which stopped our live streaming abilities and may stop us for the next 90 days. So we apologize for not being live. But guys, let's just get right into it. And I wanted to bring all of you guys together to talk about the current state of the freedom and liberty movement. Because in my personal opinion, we saw the pinnacle, the height of the freedom and liberty movement when you, Dr. Paul, were running for president of the United States. You went on a national stage and you said, well, I think we should stop bombing the world. We should look into 9/11. We should audit the Federal Reserve. We should stop torturing people. We should stop spying on our American citizens. And then the world looked back at you at the national stage and said, that's common sense. Yes. Why is someone finally saying this now? And then what we saw is the media manipulate your popularity. We saw the system cheat you. And then we saw kind of the liberty and freedom movement go down a little bit. But then Donald Trump came on the scene, and he started talking about very similar things. He talked about stop bombing the rest of the world. He even talked about looking into 9/11, being stronger on Saudi Arabia. He even said auditing the Federal Reserve and going against the globalists. He then became president, and he hasn't really kept his promises. So now the liberty movement is kind of, again, in this kind of fray, not knowing what to do. In my opinion, this is what happened. Ron and Andrew, Ron, I wanted to get your opinion first. How do you see the events that unfolded, and where do you see the current state of the liberty and freedom movement?
Well, I remain optimistic about it. I don't like setbacks, but I also recognize the obstacles in our way and what we're up against. I haven't spent some time in Washington. You know, I think of what's happening in Washington and all the political chicanery that's going on and the people I knew. That's all secondary to what is important, because I never operated on the fact that if I go there and behave and do what they want me to do, I could become a chairman, and then I'll be really important and I'll get rid of the Fed. I never worked on that because I didn't believe in it at all. The whole thing is governments reflect what the people believe. It's a reflection of an attitude of the people. So therefore, the battle is outside of Washington. Washington right now reflects the fact that the American people love militarism. They love fighting and killing and bombing people and being top dog. And they don't have much objection to the Federal Reserve, and they go along with it. They've been taught this. Every member of Congress understands, Keynesian economics and central banking. And so it's the attitudes outside of Washington. So if I did have any success, it had to be that I reached some people. And you sort of hinted to by common sense. One of the things that I always enjoyed the most was a young person especially would come up and say, I've been listening to you and I didn't agree with you, but the more I listen to you, then a light bulb goes on. I just realized that it's just common sense. That always pleased me because I think that's what, that is what the whole story is liberty is common sense, making up your own mind. It's common sense that we not hurt people. That's been around for thousands of years. All the great religions tried to teach that you're not supposed to lie, cheat, steal, or kill. But governments continue to do it. I think the governments are the real culprit in this. But it's an ideological struggle, yes, on the surface because Trump is in and he didn't do what he said. But the audience in Washington is in such shape that they're not going to change that way. We need to concentrate on reaching people outside of Washington because this system that we have now is not going to last. The Soviet system didn't last. It came apart, and it wasn't because we had a nuclear war with them. So I think this is a non-viable system. I think the markets are very, very shaky. I'm not euphoric about the markets like a lot of people are, bragging about how wonderful the stock market is, and yet 90% of the people have about the same amount of wealth as the top 10% or even less than that. So it's a major problem. It's an economic problem, but it's also a problem in getting people to understand what true liberty is all about.
Totally agree. Andrew?
Yeah, going forward, Dr. Paul, I wanted to ask you, we've seen a lot of libertarians actually join the Trump movement. We've seen a lot of libertarians campaign for Trump. And Trump has done some of the things that he said. When he said he'd have a non-interventionist foreign policy, we didn't see him overthrow Assad. A lot of people were worried that he would take out Assad, start another war like they did in Libya. But we haven't seen that altogether. Assad is still in power there. And I was wondering, for you, what do you think is the most practical way for libertarians to carry the torch and make a difference going forward? Should they just go out and educate people about libertarian ideas? Should they work within the Libertarian Party, or should they work within the Republican Party? Because it seems that it's possible for people to make a difference inside the Republican Party, the way that you have.
This is a question I get asked a whole lot, and it's sort of like those individuals that sort of a light bulb goes on, and that happened for me when I sort of could put the whole thing together. The civil liberties and the monetary and economic history and the foreign policy. So it comes together when people say, well, what do I do now? I understand it. The light bulb is on. What should I do? And I say, do whatever you want to do. You guys are doing something right now. You're trying to spread a message, and you have an intent, and you have some beliefs. And the truth is you don't have any idea how many people you reach. You might have some numbers, and people might get in your way. But if you convert 10 people, you don't know what those 10 people would do. So I have no idea if I was very effective or not, but I do know that's the way it worked. Even before the internet and TV and all these things, people's views changed because it was an idea that spread one-on-one if it has to be. And sometimes when I see the challenges by our government and the intrusions they have on us being able to broadcast and spread our message, even on the internet, I get worried about that. But then I got to thinking, an idea that is strong enough will be spread. And just remember the old saying, you can't stop an idea. Military power and politicians can't stop it. If the idea whose time has come, these ideas of liberty, the time has come, I think we're more advanced in the understanding of liberty, understanding of economic, understanding the importance of moving in a direction that the people really want. And that is, stay out of these wars. I always say and mock those who say, well, we're fighting for our Constitution and, for our freedom. But when does it happen where a bunch of people in one country between the age of 18 and 25 get together and say, oh, let's get a war going here. I think I should go to a war. And somebody else in another country have the same age group doing that. Yeah, let's go to war. There's Americans. They want to fight and kill. Now, it's always the government. It's always the special interest. So you have to, in the educational process, you have to spread the word of a message, which means that you have to show people why government is not the answer. And you have to restrain the government. The founders attempted to do that, but the truth is the Constitution hasn't worked all that well. It's been downhill for 100 years. But that doesn't mean the ideas that they had and the issue of liberty, I think, is alive and well. And in a way, you suggested that maybe even Trump benefited by this, and he at least had to pay a little attention, but maybe we weren't strong enough. He says, yeah, I'll go along with all other than the Fed. But then when you're in office, different people influence you, though. But let me tell you one thing. The first time I got involved in politics was in 76, and there was no group of people like we have today now that is that are negative, on the Federal Reserve System. And that's not just us as libertarians and people see us on the fringe. It's average people and all the criticism because it doesn't work. Central banking doesn't work. Fiat money doesn't work. And we've had, decades of that. So it's coming to an end. So this, to me, I look at it as a wonderful opportunity. So this, to me, I look at it as a wonderful opportunity. And if you can reach people, no matter how. So the answer is do whatever you can. And what do you like to do? Run for office, help other people, subsidize somebody, work hard. But many times it's one-on-one.
Yeah, with the answer in the system that we're currently facing, a decentralized answer is always the best, in my opinion. But I wanted to ask you, Dr. Paul, with Donald Trump having staff at the Bilderberg meeting, with him being surrounded by Goldman Sachs members, him hanging out with Henry Kissinger, and the banks and war machines getting what they want, there's been a lot of confusion with him fighting against the FBI with the memo right now, whether Donald Trump is a part of the deep state, whether he is fighting the deep state, or whether he has no idea what's going on. And I just wanted to kind of get your opinion. What do you think is happening with Donald Trump in his current position?
Well, of course, I don't know because I can't look into his soul and into his mind and know all his motivations. But I'll tell you one thing. I didn't join the libertarians for Donald Trump. That never made any sense to me because, I didn't really believe that. I've heard the lies and the innuendos of politicians for a long, long time. So there's very few who say something and get elected. And we still, we have some in the Congress now. And I know an individual in the Senate that lives up to those promises. But basically, you really can't trust them. But the bigger picture is there's this attitude, the educational system. I have a homeschooling program because I think it's the government schools. We're never going to see a solution unless we can compete with the government schools. And right now, who's defending the government schools? And look at the debt run up by government schools that didn't give an education and making it difficult for people to get jobs. So I see it as an opportunity as much as a challenge.
Well, I actually got the opportunity to interview Dr. Paul on Cernovich News a couple weeks back. I asked Dr. Paul if he thought Donald Trump was a puppet. That's the way a lot of people in the truth community had phrased it. They thought maybe Trump was a puppet. Dr. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, yeah, he's definitely not a puppet, no matter what it is what's going on. But I wanted to ask you a different question. This is the last question I didn't get a chance to ask you last time. There's a lot of advent of technology with robots where people are having their jobs replaced, and we're seeing even 3D printers that could build a house. We're seeing incredible robot farming technology, and there's a big question going on with socialism and whether we should have universal basic income. What's the best argument in the face of potentially millions of people losing their jobs to robots? What do you say to people that think we should have a universal basic income and the government should just give people free money?
Well, the universal income is based on theft and redistribution of wealth by guns owned by the government. No, you just want to legalize liberty and voluntarism, and things work out better than any government could ever do it. But this whole idea of worrying about loss of jobs, that's been going on for a long time. Think about the Luddites. They were afraid that the cotton gins and different pieces of equipment, they had riots and everything else over that. No, things have to be flexible. They have to be not rigid by government rules and regulations. Wages can't be, rigid. And if an industry comes in and they don't need people in certain jobs, there's going to be other jobs. They have to have a little bit more confidence. But you have to have free markets. You have to have flexibility in labor and wages and costs instead of saying, the costs are going down. The person's losing a job. We have to do this. We have to force this person to hire this at a certain wage. That's part of it. But just the fact that you've eliminated some jobs, just think of the people who used to shod horses, before the car came in. People were, the blacksmith was being put out of business, and they didn't like that. But how many jobs were created by, manufacturing cars? How many jobs might be created by manufacturing, the artificial equipment that's going to do the work, the substitute. But you need to do it. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than a couple individuals believing exactly how to plan this and where capital should go and how much money there should be, what interest rate should be, because everybody has this concern. Well, a lot of that is all motivated by good intention. But good intentions aren't enough. You have to be right on the idea, and you have to have a little confidence in it. And the best way to get confidence is study history. And the freer the society, the more productive the society, the greater the wealth, and the better distribution. Today, we know that we don't have a free society or a free market because 3% or 1% or 3 people own so much wealth in this country as a consequence of this interference and the Keynesian model and central banking and all the creation of credit going into Wall Street. All that new money after this last recession that we had. $3.4 trillion they created, but it didn't help the average person. They're still struggling. And even now with the numbers getting a little bit better, believe me, we have a long way to go because what we're seeing as an improvement won't even hardly touch, on the debt out there. Just look at the tragedy going on with the pension funds, government pension funds, and eventually inflation will destroy Social Security. Pension funds are not viable, state and county communities. So that's not going to be solved with the changes in the tax code, even though there were some beneficial changes in the tax code. No, people should have more confidence it's worked out and less confidence in a bunch of bureaucrats who claim they know what's right because the people aren't smart enough. And believe me, I had enough people in Washington tell me, well, yes, they were important because the people aren't smart enough and sometimes they're unfair, and that's why we're supposed to be up here taking care of the people. That is a fallacy, let me tell you.
I think that's a very good question and provides a big quagmire for a lot of people because how do you deal with Google censorship when people see them as a utility? How do you deal with social media monopolies, AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, and technological innovations that are creating godlike powers in the hands of the very few? When it comes to free market capitalists, this provides a big quagmire that I believe cannot be answered without violating some of its core principles. Now, it's uncertain what will happen because we're talking about the future here, the unforeseeable future. But whatever is happening, one thing that is very clear is that we are, of course, facing a brave new world. And at least there's 2 great individuals like yourselves here, Ron and Andrew, who have an open mind, clear thoughts, common sense, and are freedom advocates who are here with us a part of the ride. So I thank you guys very much. Ron, I will see you at Anarchapulco in just a few days where we will be speaking together at the conference down in Mexico. And just like you're doing your educational system, giving it out to the people so they could actually teach their children from a very young age the basic principles and common sense that everyone gets, we also are doing a Change Media University boot camp, which means we are teaching people how to be independent journalists. This is an online program that we are taking to the real world and having a boot camp in Acapulco, Mexico, with the link being in the description below if you are interested on learning and becoming a real independent journalist. So check that out if you are interested on the Anarchapulco website. Andrew's and Ron's social media will be in the description below. If you like this video, share it with your friends and family members because, of course, YouTube won't. And, of course, thank you guys for watching, donating, and being a part.
We Are Change, wearechange.org, and We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe. Again, go to the website and also sign up because, again, like he was saying, a lot of people are being censored on YouTube, social media. Some of them will claim that, it's a algorithm or there's copyright claims or, just name it. But in reality, it's basically a bullying method that's been going on against alternative media and others, conservatives, Trump supporters, even though I'm not a Trump supporter. There's definitely a censorship going on. And that should worry people. I really think it should worry people. It's not exactly a good thing. One thing that was brought up in that was universal basic income base. This idea has been floated around for a while now, and the simple phrase, basic income. If there's just no jobs because all the robots took all the jobs, you'll go ahead and just you'll get money. So now there's no jobs, you just get a ration card, because that's what it would come down to. You would basically be given a government ration card. Sound kind of familiar, isn't there points in history that can point to that not being really a good idea? I could see some. I've seen this. This was from theblaze.com. Bankrupt California city wants to give a universal basic income to residents. Stockton, California is testing a universal basic income for a select group of families to see whether the program could evolve into a broader policy, Fox News reports. How will it work? The plan is to give $500 per month to several dozen families and then monitor them and see how the money is used and how it impacts self-esteem and identity. The money will come mostly from the Economic Security Project, which is donating $1 million toward the experiment. Why are they doing this? Mayor Michael Tubbs believes it will help improve the lives of recipients in a city where 1 in 4 residents lives below the poverty line. I think it will make people work better and smarter and harder, and also be able to do things like spend time with their families, because we're not robots, Tubbs said. We're not just designed to work all day and run a rat race. Stockton went bankrupt in 2012, and many of its residents struggled financially as home prices increased and wages stayed the same. What are opponents saying? Robert Rector, welfare expert at the Heritage Foundation, said a universal basic income is the wrong response to failed immigration policies. Essentially, it says we will let the illegals come in and take all the jobs, and then we'll put American workers onto a kind of welfare reservation where they can live out their lives on that reservation, Rector said. Other critics say moving from traditional welfare to UBI could be detrimental to the poor and give money to those who don't need it as much. About the Economic Security Project, the Economic Security Project is co-led by Chris Hughes, co-founder of Facebook. From the website, the Economic Security Project is a network committed to advancing the debate on unconditional cash and basic income in the United States. In a time of immense wealth, no one should live in poverty, nor should the middle class be consigned to a future of permanent stagnation or anxiety. Automation, globalization, and financialization are changing the nature of work, and these shifts require us to rethink how to create economic opportunity for all. I think this is amazing, the way their mind works. I don't know whether to be amazed or not amazed, because it's hard for a lot of that, socialist, leftist ideology of how money works, it defines common sense. Common sense, you can't just make money appear. And well, we can go after the rich people. Well, you know, people like Facebook, Apple, where you see a lot of the big money. It took Trump's tax plan for them to repatriate portions of their holdings outside the country. Their holdings outside the country are a hell of a lot more than what they had here in the country. You go ahead and try to tax the rich. The whole country will end up poor. Because the real wealth is not held within the border. Where is that money going to come from? Middle class. You can bet on it. It will be something that is soaked up from the middle class, distributed, and then there won't be any money left. One more article from the Blaze I want to cover. Venezuela's annual inflation rate is over 4,000%. The authorities have lost control. Here's socialism for you. Venezuela's economic crisis continues to worsen, according to estimates from the Venezuelan opposition-led National Assembly. The socialist country's annual inflation rate has risen to 4,068% over the past year. Independent economists have produced similar figures. For January, inflation was 84.2%, which analysts estimate would amount to annual inflation of more than 150,000%, with prices doubling every 35 days. The Wall Street Journal reported that the inflation rate currently, the highest in the world, has risen so precipitously over the past 23 months that the Venezuelan government is unable to print enough money. Customers often need stacks of bills even when paying for small purchases. Excessive printing has worsened the country's economic crisis, with the Venezuelan government printing bolivars at a 14-fold rate since the beginning of 2017, hastened by customers' desperate spending, which forces the government to replace existing notes every 7 to 9 months. The journal noted, by comparison, $1 is now worth roughly 236,000 bolivars, an amount that, according to the journal, would have paid for a small apartment 5 years ago. Today, it barely covers an appetizer. A cup of coffee, for instance, costs 45,000 bolivars today. 12 weeks ago, it would have cost 5,500 bolivars. Just think about that. The journal spoke with former economist for the Inter-American Development Bank, Omar Zambrano, about the current Venezuelan crisis. Quote, the authorities have lost control. They can't stop creating bolivares, even if they wanted to, Zambrano said. This ends in two ways. Either we adopt the dollar or we go back to bartering. Others like Halima Croft, head of global commodity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, are concerned about Venezuela's inability to manage oil exports, which has also led to a prolonged recession. Quote, we continue to contend that given 2018's tightening oil market, any potential geopolitical driven supply distribution would have an outsized impact versus recent years when the market was awash in crude, Croft said. RBC Capital Markets has predicted a fall of at least 700,000 to 800,000 barrels per day in 2018 for a country dependent on oil. Such a drop in production would be catastrophic. You can read the rest of that at the Blaze. But there's your socialist state, awash in oil, and can't even figure out and control and, strategically get their oil out of the country. They don't refine the oil, they ship it out. And they can't even accomplish that. And I really think Venezuela's in a free fall. And I think it ends in one way, and that's Venezuela having a revolution, because I just, all they can do is continue to print and print and print and print. They can't stop, like that article was talking about. They can't stop just to replace bills, because at the rate of inflation, they can't stop. It's really hard to see where they're going, but I really think that it's going to be some sort of political flip. Ideologies will flip. Okay. Give me a split screen here. I'm trying to get this up. And if I can get it to load, I will. Okay. I got it to reload, so we should be good. game's reloading only means it's going to freeze. But hopefully we'll be okay. Okay. I'm going to play one more We Are Change clip here. And this is covering some of the latest things, which one of them I really want to cover after this. And I'll cover it. It's something that Trump is asked for. This is a pretty short clip, so, you know, he's going to touch on it here. But I really want to get into this because it doesn't make sense to me in the terms of what is said by supporters that this is supposed to show. But we'll get into that. Let's go ahead and play this.
We Are Change Daily, sometimes news show where we go over all the news that is usually kept away from you. And by the way, this is day 8 of CNN putting a false copyright strike against this YouTube channel and taking away our ability to do live streams, which we were planning to do full time, especially now with Jason Burmis working with us, but we can't. So yeah, I'm just a little frustrated about that. No one's giving me any answers, including our YouTube manager, including YouTube, including the people who filed the claim against us. So yeah, as we are slowly getting pushed off of this platform, I wanted to remind everyone to follow us on steemit.com/@LukeWeAreChange. Where not only creators but also viewers earn cryptocurrencies through just simply using the platform. A platform that I believe single-handedly has kept us alive as an independent news organization, so before we're totally blacklisted, definitely go check it out. Anyway, let's just get into the story that everyone is talking about right now, and that, of course, is the FBI text messages that were just released. Now, earlier today, Donald Trump tweeted that these new FBI texts are bombshells. Of course, he's talking about the text messages between 2 former FBI agents that the DOJ previously said were lost, but then later recovered, between 2 FBI agents that were investigating the Clinton emails and Donald Trump's Russian probe. Of course, these text messages show a clear political bias and conflict of interest when it comes to these 2 specific FBI agents, who not only privately voiced their concern about being too tough on Hillary Clinton during her investigation, while calling Donald Trump an idiot and a loathsome human, and now the kicker that just came out today between the correspondence of these 2 FBI agents was them telling each other that, quote, Obama wanted to know everything. Now, of course, anyone could interpret these texts as they want, but it is very clear that they were referring to Hillary Clinton's investigation and, of course, Barack Obama's personal involvement in that. This, of course, puts Barack Obama in hot water because he guaranteed the American public that he wouldn't get involved in these investigations, and that he was not talking to the FBI or Attorney General when it came to those political investigations or any investigations. And a big surprise here, the President of the United States lied. And what's even more interesting is that these 2 agents even said that they were being traced and that they were using another device. Now, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but this is definitely a clear PR victory for him and a big egg on the face of the Democrats and old establishment. Because, this shows very clear bias against Donald Trump, against the people who were investigating him and his political opponent at the time, as they're obsessing about this stupid-ass Russian Gate investigation that is really going nowhere. And while they obsess about this non-issue, Donald Trump is actually getting away with real bad things. And it's not just these 2 FBI agents and Barack Obama that are screwing the pooch. It's also Congressman Adam Schiff, who was caught soliciting for and asking for nude photos of Donald Trump when he was offered them up by a Russian prank show that just called his office out of nowhere and claimed that they had nudes of him, which Congressman Schiff said, yes, please, send me those nudes. And there's really nothing else to say about this story other than shame on you, Congressman. shame. With this whole Russian investigation obsession by the left and the supposed opposition, this definitely vindicates Donald Trump and makes him look good in the eyes of his peers. But now we're going to get into the news that doesn't make him look so well. And of course, we have to start off with today's headline of Donald Trump requesting the Pentagon to plan a big military parade. Now, of course, many other countries have military parades like North Korea, China, Russia, France, and others. But three things. One, there's a lot more important things to do than just parade around. Two, morally, I am against this. I don't think butthole leaders should have the authority to tell other people to go murder other people because they were born somewhere else or because of their political differences. Celebrating how effective of a murderer you are is not something you should celebrate. I understand there's some well-intentioned good people in the military who do join the military for the right purposes. But please tell me the last time the U.S. military acted appropriately to actually help humanity and not further a bigger geopolitical cause or a corporate interest. Three, what are we celebrating? Endless wars are only escalating in Afghanistan. We're getting into another forever war in Somalia, which Donald Trump is expanding. We helped create the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now with helping Saudi Arabia bomb Yemen. Libya right now is literally a failed state with ISIS growing in their country. As you know, human slavery just became a thing again inside of that country, trafficking Africans into Europe. All of this while trillions of taxpayer dollars are missing right now from the Pentagon. And with audits, we are finding out billions of dollars totally missing while they still get unlimited budgets, the majority of our tax-paying dollars, and carte blanche just to do whatever the hell they want with unlimited money. That, of course, Donald Trump is only increasing. And now he wants thousands of soldiers to salute him as he's making the problem worse. And by continuing to put the world in danger, by continuing the neoconservative doctrine that was introduced by George H.W. Bush, followed by Barack Obama, and now expanded by Donald Trump, which a lot of you damn Trumpers and supposed independent alternative media don't want to face the reality of. But guess what? It is here. There's no denying it. Just now, Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, he's calling for sea-based nuclear weapons so he could have leverage over Russia. Also just moments ago, the Israeli government, which of course is working in tandem with Donald Trump, has just launched an airstrike on the Syrian government. Of course, the Syrian air defenses, which are propped up by Russia, have stopped all of the missiles, but the provocation is there and is only expanding in that region, which has really devolved into a proxy war between global countries that have been going at it for years now with no end in sight. In other related news, speaking about Israel, there was a major court ruling just a few days ago that ruled that in the United States, people could not be punished for trying to boycott Israel, and that trying to do so is now officially unconstitutional and a denial of free speech. A very important ruling that, of course, props up freedom of speech in this country, which, of course, the AIPAC lobby tried to take away. But don't worry, here in our military-dominated police state society, there, of course, are other liberty issues to worry about, just like how the United States government is now testing facial recognition scanners and biometric facial recognition technology specifically for people now in moving vehicles. This, of course, could explain the mystery around the metal towers that have been propping up in New York City tunnel and bridges. That, of course, the city and state will not explain what they are, even though they are clear surveillance tools. And we have to face the reality that we are heading into a Chinese-style police state, where now in China, we are even seeing police officers with high-tech glasses that use facial recognition in order to spot suspects in crowded public places on the streets in China, which of course is a dystopian sci-fi television Black Mirror-like terrifying future that already exists in China and that the United States is slowly creeping into. And oh yeah, the FDA just declared that kratom, a botanical substance that many people use organically and naturally, especially in Asian cultures, has now officially been declared as an opioid. But don't worry, you could get the highly addictive heroin-based opioid painkillers from your local doctor with the help of just any prescription as they shove the pills down your gosh darn throat, because we're also living in a pharmaceutical industrial complex industry that, of course, some people would make it the point is actually hurting more people than helping. But whatever you do, don't take any kratom or dare even Google what that is. Moving forward, also, oh yeah, other wonderful news. Just as of yesterday, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange lost his bid to get the UK arrest warrant against him thrown out, which of course will keep him and occupy him at the Ecuadorian embassy for an unknown time. Of course, we said this was most likely going to happen, and it did, and is most likely coming from a secret grand jury indictment that the United States government has against Julian Assange that they are awaiting and working in cooperation with the United Kingdom in order to push and grab Julian and then hold them accountable to the law, which of course a large number of the people in Donald Trump's administration are for. Just a heads up there, I thought you should know that. Now, some good news, actually. Holy cow. In San Francisco, the city there is actually wiping out thousands of marijuana convictions dating back all the way to 1975, meaning that thousands of felons and misdemeanor crimes will be resentenced or dismissed since the passing of a new California law that legalizes marijuana. This, of course, is a huge kick in the balls to the war on drugs, which is a war that is meant to backwards in the United States. And hooey, this is some great news overall. Elon Musk also had a very successful missile launch yesterday, which he is saying hopefully will inspire an exciting international space race and maybe, hopefully, one day inspire one world leader down the line to understand that maybe instead of spending trillions of dollars on the death and war industry, maybe we could just stop fudging each other up all around the world and actually combine our resources and skills and money and explore outer space and the universe and the galaxy, seek a question of what is just outside of our limited, small understanding of our existence. I'm optimistic for that future, and I hope you are too. But there's still congressmen trying to look for news of Donald Trump. We definitely have a long way ahead of us, but I think it's doable. And if I didn't think it was doable, I wouldn't be doing this show. So I gratefully thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting us on wearechange.org/donate. Without your donations, bitcoins, PayPals, checks, purchases, we wouldn't be able to be here. And that's why I love you guys. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.
Again, We Are Change, wearechange.org, and We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Again, also go to the website, subscribe, because you never know when YouTube might just pull the plug. Very important that you do that. Now, there was an article out of Reason when I heard about this military parade idea. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, military parade, you mean like what, China or North Korea or, you know, Russia does, you know, the big dun, 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 you know, type feeling going on there. Why? And I'm thinking that's not common in America. Oh, hold on. No, we've had military parades. Like after World War II ended, there were parades, victory parades. We didn't parade our power, we paraded our accomplishment. And that's where this idea of this military parade kind of differs from the average American military type parade. Other than, you know, maybe if there's a parade and there might be a veterans float, or something supporting the troops, but not a military parade. Not unless there was some type of victory. And then I seen this article out of Reason. I was like, exactly what I was saying. And it says, the title of this, let's go ahead and have a military parade in Washington, but declare victory in the war on terror first. Says here Donald Trump's long-standing desire for a military parade in D.C. has turned into a presidential directive, according to a report in the Washington Post. That led to the usual back and forth in the punditocracy. Liberals got a bit of collective amnesia about America's storied history of jingoism, claiming that a military parade doesn't reflect American values. In fact, like it or not, many presidents have found comfort in wrapping themselves in the flag and hiding behind service members and veterans. Trump supporters and even some conservatives who don't support Trump lauded the idea. The National Review's David French, the guy Bill Kristol once touted as a potential third-party candidate in 2016, said he was fine with a military parade because of the things he says the military has done since 9/11, like toppling the Taliban, Saddam Hussein, and defeating the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. He didn't note that American troops remain in Afghanistan more than 16 years after toppling the Taliban, and that they are also present in Hussein's old Iraqi stomping grounds and in Syria. Representative Justin Amash may have had the most relevant take. And this is from Justin Amash's Twitter. I'm all for a parade if it's to celebrate bringing our young men and women home from these unauthorized wars overseas. Reason's own Jesse Walker made a similar suggestion earlier in the day. And he tweeted, I'm fine with the big military parade, but only if they invite every U.S. soldier in Afghanistan and then let them head home from there. Trump's desire for a military parade is certainly on brand. He's spoken highly of France's traditional Bastille Day military parade ever since being invited as President Emmanuel Macron's guest last year, and he made a big deal during his presidential campaign for saving a veterans parade in New York in 1995. At the same time, Trump has sometimes flirted with understanding that the U.S. foreign policy is dangerously interventionist. A military parade would be a small price to pay for declaring victory and ending the war on terror. If someone could convince the president to link the two, it would certainly be an ego booster. And it just resonated with me. That's how I was feeling. I was like, yeah, let's have one, and we'll end all the wars, and we'll bring all the troops home. We'll go ahead and, shut down all the bases in all the different countries. We'll only rely on a moving Navy and military to secure the borders. Only from outside attack. People can leave freely. That should be a stipulation. You can never, keep someone from leaving. I go back to, Ron Paul talked long before about the risk of calling for a wall. Yes, they can keep people out, but they can also keep people in. And with how volatile our society and our political system is, I really worry about that. Now I'm for making sure we're not bringing in, ISIS terrorists, or, you know, Mexican cartel members. But there's an extent you take it to. And part of it, too, is having a society that can protect itself. Look at Mexico. Everyday person can't just go get them a gun. But the cartels have a lot of times more than the police forces do. While the public is just, they're just kind of servants to the cartels. But again, there's an extent you take it to. We continue to call for, tougher border controls. But we're pulling people over in Florida well within the border of the United States and asking for, is everyone here a citizen? Are you a citizen? No, you catch them at the border. If they make it past, then I think it really comes down to, you catch them when they commit a crime. You don't go looking for them. You catch them when they commit a crime. Because otherwise you have to abridge American citizens' rights. And if you have to do that to accomplish that goal, then you shouldn't be able to do that. If they commit a crime and you find out they're here illegally, then you do what you need to. This border control and build the wall, it's a very, very thin line that you try to walk. And it's not allowing or trying to prevent as many as possible of the actual criminals that don't care about anybody's lives. They'll leave everything behind them burning. But also not bridging people's rights. And people are like, oh, you're supposed to be libertarian. You should be for open borders. Not when you have more corrupt, more authoritarian governments that have allowed for criminal entities to rule and constantly fight. Within Mexico, it's like multiple little kingdoms constantly at war with each other. And everybody's caught in the middle. It's getting bad down there. It's been bad, but there's good parts of Mexico still. you look at a lot of the tourist areas, those are well off. But a lot of it also comes from the war on drugs and the drug trade. The more illegal drugs there are, the more money they can make off of it. The war on drugs has been responsible for a lot of crime, a lot of death, a lot of addiction. A lot of people are like, well, war on drugs is prevent people from doing it, but in reality, it doesn't. You tend to find it actually increases. Okay, I want to get to the last clip if I time here. Yeah, we should be Okay, sorry guys. Okay. Okay, I don't think you guys are hearing it. I'm going to try it one more time. If it doesn't work, I'll bring up something else. Should go.
Another dimension, because the handgun is concealable. It's a different conversation than just making rifles. All handguns will eventually be available for people to produce for themselves and to do in the privacy of their own homes. Gun control can never die because it lives in the hearts of men. No, gun control is not dead. It's undead. Gun control is undead. And we just keep killing it, but it just keeps coming back.
In 2012, a then 25-year-old crypto-anarchist named Cody Wilson started Defense Distributed, an organization devoted to removing the barriers from making firearms at home. The following year, Defense Distributed released the Liberator, the first 3D-printed pistol. The Liberator is a simple, single-shot .380 caliber handgun. At the time, the replaceable barrels were only considered safe for one shot. 5 years after the Liberator debut, the technological limitations of homemade firearms have started disappearing. The materials are cheaper and better, the machines are more precise, and the software is more advanced. It's a new reality that hasn't entirely filtered into public debates over gun control.
It outstrips people's daily experience. They don't really understand what's taking place.
This is a ghost gun.
Because now it is very easy, completely legal, to make a firearm right in the comfort of your own home.
The era in which the government can even hope to keep a fully functional firearm out of the hands of someone truly determined to get one is coming to an end.
Now, I can ship gun machines that help you crank out 1911s in your kitchen all day long, and no one has anything to say about it. Because what is there to say about it?
By late 2014, Defense Distributed had raised enough capital to begin manufacturing the Ghost Gunner, a small machine that uses pre-coded commands to remove metal from unfinished firearm parts. Parts that, when sold by a manufacturer, are legally required to contain a serial number. What comes out of the Ghost Gunner is a key component of an untraceable yet fully functional metal firearm. In late 2017, Defense Distributed released files that allow the Ghost Gunner to mill out unfinished metal handgun frames. Wilson says the new focus on handguns is an important step towards the mainstreaming of home gun manufacturing.
A lot of people living in an urban setting like DC wouldn't consider slinging an AR-15 on their back walking around the street, but they would at least think about whether they wanted to have a handgun concealed and made without anyone else's knowledge.
While a 3D printer assembles objects out of layers of plastic or other materials, a milling machine like the Ghost Gunner does the opposite, carving a solid piece of material based on specifications spelled out in code. Defense Distributed sells the machine for just under $1,700.
You can make a 1911 in your kitchen, naked in your bathtub if you want, and no one has to know about it. It's really cool, and that wasn't true last year, in the way that it's true now.
Thanks to the internet, the newest generation of homemade gun designs are approaching the quality of store-bought firearms.
My name's Darren Booth. I'm a union carpenter. Started getting into 3D printing about 2014, and I was downloading different objects from the internet, printing them out, and I wasn't very satisfied with the way they turned out, so I started getting into 3D design, and then that's when I heard about the Liberator. I like the Liberator, it's fine, you know, it's only good for one shot, so I thought, well, what can I do to make it a little better? This is the latest version, the Shetty AP9. I make them out of PLA plastic, but they hold up well. This very gun here has probably had over 5,000 rounds shot to it.
The digital files that are used to create guns using milling machines and 3D printers are written and shared online by hobbyist gun printers. Booth is a regular of the FOSCAD group, and the community worked together to create the digital files for the Shetty.
But it's an open community, it's an open chat. Anybody can go on there and just ask questions.
I watch some of these groups begin, like on my own websites when I used to host forums and IRC channels and things. It's great. Like in our earliest days, I imagined that would be what victory looked like. There would have to be communities taking up these projects on their own.
It's an intellectual exercise. It helps you, you know, and just it's fun to come up with new ideas and exchange information.
And this information exchange is at the core of the home manufactured gun movement.
The 3D printed gun was never itself. What we developed, what we shared online was not the gun, but it was the files that could create the gun.
It's freeware for anybody who wants to build it. Hopefully somebody will make it even better.
The Shetty requires additional parts made by third parties, but those components can be freely ordered on the internet from unregulated vendors.
Shoot a little low to the left.
When the only thing you need to create a gun at home is a tiny digital file and a trip to the hardware store, gun control becomes impractical. It may also be impossible to outlaw the distribution of digital files used for handgun production. Wilson argues that an individual's right to create and distribute blueprints for a gun is protected by the First Amendment.
Sharing that software was a political speech act, and the software itself, because it can be changed and evaluated and understood by humans, the software itself is speech. So it's about fighting about that information, not about what the information can become.
In 2013, the State Department forced Defense Distributed to remove the download links to the files for the Liberator, claiming they violated the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, or ITAR.
They saw these kids, online being like, hey, not only no gun control, but, we're going to destroy the whole concept because the internet's going to serve guns. They were looking for a way to put their own power kind of over what we were doing. The closest thing they could come up with at the time was the ITAR.
The ITAR is a set of regulations that govern what kind of military materials can leave the U.S. and go to other countries.
The State Department and Justice Department say sharing this type of information, gun file, with American citizens on the internet is tantamount to exporting it to foreigners. And this somehow violates a foreign affairs power of the executive.
Joined by the Second Amendment Foundation and the prominent appellate attorney Alan Gura, Wilson challenged the State Department's order. In spring of 2017, they petitioned the Supreme Court for a temporary injunction that would null the takedown order until their lawsuit was resolved. In January of 2018, the High Court declined to hear the case, sending it back to a lower court in Texas to be argued on the merits.
Yeah, we're going to win our case. And it doesn't mean that we have to win it in court. But, we'll win it in the court of public opinion. And that doesn't mean that public opinion will agree with us.
In other words, the tools to build your own firearms are already in circulation. But Wilson is trying to win legal protections for future innovations in this space. Defense Distributed's focus on handguns is in part a legal strategy based on the 2008 Supreme Court case, District of Columbia versus Heller, that affirmed the right to own a handgun for self-defense.
The handgun is at the center of what is protected in the Heller decision, as everything's understood now. So whereas AR-15s may not ever be backed up by the Supreme Court, there's no way of getting around right now the protections that the Supreme Court gave to the handgun. And so this is the core of the Second Amendment liberty as it's currently understood. Now deployable, downloadable, manipulatable. You can do it in your garage. And so it's a kind of temptation. It's an invitation to discourse, if you will.
Automated, off-the-books firearm technology is a reality, and there's nothing anyone can do to change that.
That was from Reason.com or Reason TV on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Check out a lot of Reason's articles on the Second Amendment. They have some great articles covering that and the right to self-defense. But when it comes down to this, the Liberator, there you can find downloads for that, even though he had to take it off. There's enough trusted sources for the Liberator downloads. There's all kinds of other downloads, as they were talking about on there. The ability for people to get the information's already out there, but they're still trying to stifle others from being able to do the same thing, but it's not going to work. And this is the one thing that gives me hope for the future. As much as they try to regulate and stop actual progress in the name of progress, they lose because the innovation of the people progresses quicker than the government. Therefore, I believe that the tools will continue to be out there to one-up as long as people are aware that those tools are out there. Those type of tools are what will keep people free. Whether it be cryptocurrencies, whether it be these downloads so you can make your own 1911 in your kitchen. 3D printing guns. There's so many options out there right now that allow people to exercise their freedoms. And when you do that, it makes it even harder for authoritarians to try to become dictators, tyrannical people. And we know that's what they want to do. They want to try to use their innovation. But, I always have to catch myself because, people are like, government's big, look at all these tools they got. But, just like when we've seen SpaceX, oh, it was in cooperation with it. Listen, Elon Musk has put his money into this. This, for the most part, has been a private endeavor for the most part. Without Elon Musk doing this, would it happen just with NASA? Probably not. Launches the most powerful rocket into space. Successfully lands 2 of the 3 boosters remotely. They automatically land. Almost synchronized. I look at what people privately have been doing with drone technology. I've seen what people have been doing with 3D printing and milling and, coding. And I have to remember there's still hope. And then I see, networks like UCY and others and, the other broadcasts here on UCY. And it reminds me, that the freedom of speech, even though you see a lot of the social media networks now trying to censor, you see them attack and, put these false claims on a lot of accounts and independent media. They're still out there. The voices are still being heard. There's still the ability for us to broadcast to you. And this doesn't just reach the United States. This reaches beyond. And that's what technology has allowed us to do. Now, I'm sure, we're censored in some country. I'm sure that happens. But for the most part, we have been able to spread ideas beyond borders. Even though, I fight for the freedoms here, the idea of freedom should not just stop at our border. It should go way beyond our borders. When the idea of freedom does that, when, libertarian ideology and, small government, ideology and a moral basis of what's right and wrong becomes a part of society, governments and people that try to manipulate and control the populations won't be able to do so. Because it becomes something beyond our differences. It becomes a common belief that as long as we're not harming each other, not abridging each other's rights, that we need to, as a free people, as a free society, as a free world, be okay with that and don't allow others to manipulate us. Oh, you don't like how they do that? We should gang up and outlaw that so we don't have to deal with it. No. Because guess what? If they get in power, they're going to start outlawing things that you do that they don't like. Back and forth, back and forth. And that's how we are where we are now. Same with a lot of the foreign affairs that we have. Whether it be religious leaders or governments that manipulate people into hating others that they have never met, that they've never had to deal with, never had to live by. That their lives never intermingled until this point that now they would fight each other. These are governments, these are political leaders, and these are media. And even though I'm for self-defense, I also realize, you know, we have bases in all these countries. We have agencies out there stirring up things. And a lot of this Ron Paul has spoke about. He spoke about it in the House, on the floor of the House. It's archived. And we're still having to deal with it today. We have to move beyond this, and I think it comes from the message of freedom. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to go UCY.tv, hit that Amazon button down towards the bottom. Shop Amazon through UCY.tv. We appreciate the support. And stay tuned here on UCY.tv for the great broadcast coming up after this. And, you know, when we look at the political atmosphere today, it's about turmoil. It's about stirring each other's emotions and feelings up and causing a real divide in the country. And people say it about Trump, and it might be true about Trump, but it's also equally true about the left that has continued to attack him since he's been president, unlike they've ever done really with most presidents. Yeah, they've done it with other presidents, but did they do it with Obama? No, they praised him. But they couldn't take a second to go, you know, let's give this guy a chance. So they're equally a part of the blame. And I think as alternative media, there's a lot of people out there that are not playing that game. And I think it's very important that we don't get involved in that little skirmish, that little game. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv. Great broadcast coming up after this. Take care.
My name is